Everything is a tragedy. Everybody has a tragedy. You know, you think your tragedy is the only tragedy? Everyone has a tragedy. Everyone
So
has
can
an
you
interesting life.
tell me where we're going and
I don't know, where are we going? To Massapequa?
yeah.
Where it all began. Those days, that was the hippie era. We had a lot of friends who were so called hippies, and we would go to parties and do drugs with them. And by drugs, I mean marijuana. And you get turned on, and
I
well,
mean, you have to put this in the context of the
finding
time.
oneself,
It was the
finding
early
yourself
70s, and
through drugs and
there was a lot
experimentation,
of
and
uh,
there
cultural
was sexual
uh,
experimentation with other people, and
experimentation going on. People were in all kinds of uh, atypical situations.
so we did some
Uh,
experimentation, going to bed with other people, having sex. And that was the age and the era of free love. I remember once all four bodies in bed together. That's how it
Not
worked.
exactly
Just
sure
thinking
how that
about
happened.
pleasure
You know,
and
people were writing
about the music,
alternative
the
lifestyles, and there was
Stones,
stuff in the
and
movies
the
about
Moody
it, and
Blues. And you put on the music and you
people were
smoke some
experimenting a
pot,
lot.
and everything was cool. So you just go with the flow. And we did on several occasions. We moved to Bay Drive full of hope. Well, that was short lived, that hope. Paul started with the same
And
bullshit
I
again.
was very wishy-washy about the
Depressed,
future, and
doesn't like
I
anyone.
really wasn't sure I wanted to be in this rat race that I'm in, and I've been in.
Well, what happened was when we moved into Bay Drive, we joined the swim club. And we went one day to an outing with the yacht club. Paul had a little boat. And on this outing, we met Eleanor and Robert, a very nice couple. And we started to socialize with them.
They were fighting, and they took a break from fighting, and then we were introduced to them, and so I could see that they had a lot of stress and strain in their marriage too. I mean, Deanna and I had a lot of stress and strain in our marriage. I mean, we were going to get divorced, so we had a kid, the second kid.
We double dated, the way
We were
most
going to get
couples do.
divorced.
We were out to dinner and we were having dessert. And of course, Robert's a psychoanalyst. So he said, I'd like everybody to describe themselves in terms of a food. So we were thinking,
It's very
and
funny.
Eleanor said sour cream. She was so on target. Paul said coconut. Oh, was that on target? Believe it or not, I forgot what Robert said. But I said peach Melba, sweet and soft. And ever since then, he was calling me Peaches, which was very flirtatious.
And there started to be some mutual attraction between the men and the women. And Robert was flirting with Deanna, and I was flirting with Elvie, and it was okay, it was like we gave permission to each other. And part of it, I think, was that we were just kind of bored with the original couples. I think were sort of bored and not so interested in their spouses anymore.
And then we went on this boat trip on their boat. It was supposed to be one night, but we got stuck. We got high and dry on a sandbar.
Oh yes, that was terrific. We got stuck in the middle of nowhere on a boat. We had to wait till the morning for the tide to come up so we could come back.
So we were stranded there until the tide came back. which was fortuitous for this entire quadrangle to enable it to happen. Gave us the time. So we're sitting on his boat, and we're smoking pot and getting high and laughing and giggling and drinking. And Robert says, let's discuss our fantasies. Everybody's going gulp. What were your fantasies, he said, about this weekend? Everybody said, we didn't have any, denial. And well, Robert says, I'll go first. He says, I had a fantasy about going to bed with Deanna. So everybody went gulp. And I said, I plead the fifth, because I had fantasies about Robert. And Paul and Eleanor declined. They demurred. Oh, we didn't have any fantasies.
Oh, the boat was the beginning of the relationship. That was the first time when we would go off together, the four of us. I don't know where the kids were. We must have made arrangements for them to stay at home. I don't remember. And we stay overnight out in the bays there by Fire Island.
So we went to sleep with our respective spouses that evening. And then the next day, he and I was sitting outside, and Eleanor and Paul were in the cabin talking about something, drinking, eating, nibbling, and Robert reached over and kissed me. And that was the first kiss. And I liked it very much. And Paul, at this point, came up from the cabin and saw us kissing. And he retreated. He just turned around and walked back into the cabin. So he didn't confront us on this issue right then and there, which he could have, but he didn't. He let it happen. From there on, we were inseparable, the four of us. So there was a chemistry, if you will, a pulling that we couldn't be apart.
It's funny, they had a dysfunctional marriage, and Deanna and I had a dysfunctional marriage, but when the four of us, when the two couples were together, things got easier. So something about it made things more fun, and we had fun together.
We would do everything together. We became a foursome, even before the physical happened. So it was like a metaphysical foursome. It was a force that we couldn't even control.
Oh, no, that's kind of embarrassing.
About a
to
month
talk about.
after the boat scene, I started to work for Robert because he lost his secretary. So I began typing for him. And sure enough, one day when I was doing his typing work, which was in this house downstairs in the office, we made love. And then after that happened, we told Eleanor and Paul. They said, well, now it's just up to us. So they went out and, had sex.
It was very titillating to get close to another woman who was a sexy person and not have my wife particularly worried about it. We had great times together. It wasn't like it was a sleazy thing. We had really nice times. But we also had this flirtation going on.
This was not like just an affair. This was more than that. This was a foursome. We ate dinner at their house one night. We ate dinner at our house one night. At night, the men would switch houses after the children went to sleep. So Robert would look at these homes. Robert would come to our house and sleep over, and he'd leave in the morning before you girls got up. It was unbelievable how we kept this up for years. Robert's car was at Robert's home, and that Paul's car was at Paul's home. But they weren't. It was like an inside joke. Nobody knew. It was our joke.
Robert and I used to go to, on one night a week, to sculpture class. But we pretty we were very open with each other, and I trusted him, and I think he trusted me. That I wasn't, that neither one of us was going to use the situation to their advantage. That we would be honest with each other.
In the beginning, yes. It was a force that was like we were out of control. It just took over our lives, and I just had to go with it.
We could have broken it all off, I think, up until the fire. And then after the fire, we sort of were, by circumstance, they just moved in. And they moved in rather than, renting a house or something like that. And that sort of gelled it.
The neighbors talked about us. They knew, as you know. The neighbors talked about us.
I think people were sort of getting wind of the fact that these two suburban couples were hanging out together. This woman across the street, she would say, when she saw the two families together, she said, "What's going on with you guys?" And we said, "No, we're fine, we're fine." And she said, "Oh, you're playing with fire."
Maybe people
Remember
picked
she
up on
said
the
that.
vibes. They knew
She
there
was
was a lot
cute.
of sexual energy going on there.
Some
and
of the
they
neighbors, some of the
wanted
people
in.
here were titillated by it, and they were friendlier. And some were sort of standoffish.
Oh, the swingers, the swappers. But it's funny. We swapped, but we weren't swingers. We weren't swinging back and forth.
At the time the fire happened, I think we were both involved sexually with the opposite. And it was exclusive. It wasn't going back and forth. The original spouses weren't having sex. Or maybe they were, I don't know, but I wasn't.
Once the children would go to
presume that they
sleep,
weren't.
the men would change bedrooms. And then early in the morning, they would change bedrooms again.
There was some shifting around.
And we try to keep that pretense
But like
up
I
as
started
long
to
as
say
we could.
before, when you think about this thing and just think about it, it sounds kind of weird and sleazy and aberrant. But when I was looking at the pictures the other night and I was going through them, I realized that it was really a nice time.
He loved it. I think it filled up his life. It filled up a gap.
We went on
For him.
trips together,
He found it much
with
more
the
interesting.
kids. But I remember feeling very comfortable. And I didn't feel like I was on my own and I was on my head and that I was going to be the sole responsible person for making this thing, making the marriage go, making the household go, that I could share it with somebody. And the other guy had resources. He was a little more secure than I was. It just felt easier. Of course, we were probably deluding ourselves, but we thought it was an interesting solution. Because I was very happy with Ellie, and Robert and Deanna seemed to be very happy with each other.
We were good friends. But then things got out of hand because Eleanor is a bitch. She kind of loved me but hated me. I had very long hair. I was very attractive and very sexy. I remember a scene in the kitchen where she was looking at me and she said, "I'd love to cut your hair off." It was so
there was a lot of fighting
angry,
at that
so
time
hostile.
there was a lot of conflict and irritation between Ellie and Deanna. I remember that they were fighting a lot.
Oh,
and squabbling
nasty
a lot.
bitch. You can't do that. And you can't go out to dinner here in Massapequa because somebody will see you and be mean to the children. Eleanor was always directing. She was the director, and I resented it. I felt stifled.
Well, I think in retrospect, I didn't understand at the time, but I think that Deanna had her sights on Robert, and Ellie maybe understood that something was going on there that was shifting.
So I picked up a knife that was on the table, and I said, "You are a bad person." I said, what you do is you take a knife and you just dig it into somebody, and then you turn it. I threw it across the table. It's a big knife. So obviously he wanted to kill her.
I mean, we were going to the psychiatrist. The group was going to a psychiatrist. We had group therapy, but it was a special version.
So we tell him our stories, what's going on, and Eleanor is being manipulative and controlling, and this is the arrangement.
You know, the group would go to meet
Deanna's
with him once a
uncomfortable with
week,
it,
and
he was fascinated.
we would
he
talk
wanted to write a
about
book on it.
the
wanted to write
conflicts
papers
and
on it.
problems that we were
So he was encouraging our
experiencing together,
relationship
yeah.
going on this way. And
we were deluding ourselves.
Robert thought that he was interested in getting involved, sexually speaking. I was saying, I think we should get divorces and marry the people that we're in love with. And Eleanor was saying, no, I don't want that. That's unnecessary. We'll stay together this way.
And at some point, Deanna and Robert announced that they were going, and Ellie went bonkers. She went absolutely bonkers. And I was very angry, too.
He was devastated. He says, I thought you'd come back to me, that this was just like a fling. I said, well, you're deluding yourself because people can't go backwards. There's no going back.
I just thought it was a grand idea, and it never reached fulfillment. It could have been bigger. It could have been better. I think the people involved in the group were still concerned more about themselves and their family than they were about keeping the thing going. And maybe that's inevitable, you know.
You can't go on forever. These things do not work. I don't think they work. These extended families. Too many jealousies, too many control issues. Maybe it worked because we were very young and we were all seeking, you know, looking and finding. It was a bit of a discovery about ourselves. We were still growing. I was a kid. We thought we were a brave new world together. You know, that together we're going to start a new fashion, so to speak, that people will live this way in the future.
You know, there are societies where this kind of thing happens. They have group marriages and things like that. But not in, not in America. Not in middle-class America.
Did the kids know about it? Did you talk to the kids?
Well, I'm going to ask you, did you know about it?
I mean, I never really had any open discussion with you or Ronnie about it.
We just would say we love each other. That's all. That's why we're together all the time.
But kids know these things, without telling them. I'm sure they knew.
Robert said it's none of my business. And
Is that what he said?
You were not happy.
did you think it might have been related? Did you ever talk to me about what was going on?
I don't remember, Amy. I don't remember. I was a very good woman, I have to tell you that, and a good mother, and very loving. But I was wild and spirited, and I was living out a childhood that I never had. All right, let's go. Open this because I can't get my hair wet.